Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to the Q&A&Critique number 59, the Let's Be for Artist edition. It is now currently 2000 UTC on Friday, the 9th of September. And today we're going to be doing a live stream digital art questions and answer event here in the Be for Artist Discord server. Today is kind of an exception to the rule. We have no special guest. Though, just to give you guys a heads up, we do have a special guest next week, and we'll be interviewing Arundel about his beginner course with geometry notes. So keep an eye out for the 16th of September to hear a little bit more about Arundel. But today's topic is about Retopology, tips and tricks, since I have a job about that at the moment, and we're also going to be taking a look at some art by you from the community. Right now we have one art piece that has been submitted by Plebes, and Plebes has been here with me earlier on during the first Q&As back in the day, so I'm kind of excited to see his new piece, which is actually a really beautiful piece. So without further ado, he's not currently connected at the moment, so I'll give him some time. If not, we can record this for later. So let's start with Retopology. So since this is an open microphone question and answers and critique, if you do have questions, feel free to comment into the chat or comment into the voice microphone, and we can make it interactive. So let's begin. My first question though for today is basically the basis of why we're doing Retopology, and that is, what is it? What is Retopology? What do you know is Retopology? Person Slinks is writing. So Slink says he does Retopology, or we do Retopology for pain and suffering. Which is partially true. Oh, and we got another art piece by Pers, who has been working on a very cool piece right now. So I'm going to take a look at that shortly. So Pers says he doesn't do Retopology because he doesn't know how. Okay.
To me, Retopology is a pain because I fiddle with the, I don't remember now, but the modifier that glues things, so it's really hard. So and then when I use the Retopology modifier, it's not desired, so it's not like I want. So for me, Retopology means pain.
Retopology means pain. Slink also clarifies, we mainly do Retopology to make unclear geometry something clear. We also explain, and now he needs to explain what is clear geometry. And also Pers has mentioned that it's also about levels of detail for game assets typically. So these are all valid questions. So basically, let's take a closer look. Retopology is basically, as you know, a computer draws geometry with vertices, loops, and faces and things. But every now and then, the hardware can have its limits, and sometimes you may run out of RAM, or you have not enough VRAM to run all of the topology inside of your scene. So we do retopology, which is a very laborious process. It doesn't have to be, to fix things to make them run faster inside of, for example, game engines, or to run faster with Eevee, or to run faster and render faster inside cycles to load faster. So today I've been working with the number of different weapons, so let's take a look at one of them. So here is a weapon that I have called a Schmeiter, which is a little sword here. As you can see, if we take a look at the top right,
Schmeiter.
It's like a sword, I think. So if we take a look at the statistics, we're looking at more or less 28,900 triangles. If you look at the handle here in full screen, this handle is extremely, I guess you could say, dense in topology. So because of this, I run a process of retopology to kind of lower the polygon count to more than 1/4. So now it is 2,500 triangles, which is now game asset worthy to run. Some of the things I didn't have to retopologize, and other things I did. And with that, I preserve the silhouette of the shape of the object, and I lower the polygon count in general. So as you can see, if we take a flick between one and the other, so the old version has quite a dense topology on the handle here. Meanwhile, the new version is a little bit more clean, and when I triangulate it, it still keeps the shape, and I save some topology. So this is why we do retopology, is to save resources so that things load faster, run faster, render faster, and animate faster. So even though it is painful sometimes...
And easier to UV unwrap.
And easier to UV unwrapped, that is correct. So let me just keep a look in the chat. So that is why we do retopology. So I'm going to give you guys some, I guess you could say, some quick tips to know how to do some retopology, and then we can take a look at it in action. And then we're going to take a look at Persbeat's incredible animation, and then Plebe's piece, which is a nice piece. So let's go and take a look at the basics, or the basis of retopology. So you all know what is a loop, right? A geometry loop, correct? In the Twitch chat, let me just take a quick look. Day Toronto says retopology is like organizing our vertices better to be more efficient. That is correct. You don't know the right way to do it, but that's how you understand it. Good, excellent. That's exactly the point. Pers has mentioned that my comments of the art. You hear the Plebe's, and yours is incredible, and yours is nice. Both of yours are incredible. Alright, so I have made some high density basic primitives. Here we have Suzanne, here we have like a curved cylinder, here we have this crazy icosphere that's been subdivided. Then we have this rounded beveled cube, and this rounded cylinder with lots of loops. So the first things that we can do is we can use a number of modifiers to help us retopologize, or use the editing tools inside of Blender or Beaver Artists to remove loops. So for example, the goals for retopology is usually, let's take a closer look. The goals is to practically reduce triangles. And the other one is to reduce loops. And this one is also preserve silhouette. This is the important part, to preserve the shape of the actual model. And with that, also we need to preserve the normals. So the normals and the shape is really where the magic happens, because you can make something look incredibly nice, even though it is a lot less, I guess you could say a lot less topology. So let's take a look at this mace, this high poly mace. So this mace here, as you can see, is got a lot of topology right now. It's about 33,000 triangles. Somebody must have made this in ZBrush. And because it is so high poly, this cannot be used inside of a game, even though it is a game asset. So when I did the retopology for this, I used a technique of transferring some normals and dropped the topology to about, whoops, let me just hide this piece. To about, there are some pieces that are still showing, 6,000 or even less. Because some of there's some high poly pieces still. Right. So basically, I can drop the silhouette of the shape. That still needs to be rebaked to some degree. but I could already dropped it to a fraction of what it was using different techniques. And with that, I've been using a number of different techniques to preserve the normals of the shapes, so that in the 3D space, if we take a look here, and we remove the shapes here, you can see that if we take a look at this like knob here, or in this top part here, if we switch out into the high poly, you can see that there are some normals based on the topology that is very clear, which is the shape of the bevels, the shape of the curves around here, the shape around the cone. These types of bevels can be improved when we do the retopology using different techniques. So up here on the top, I can use the technique of preserving normals with the different face areas or not, to kind of fake the normals of the shape so that it looks similar to the original high poly. Just give me a moment, my Discord crashed. Normals. So we got another question here in Twitch, and the question is normals. So normals are basically, okay, if you're still here on Discord, my Discord crashed, I'm sorry about that. So let me just start up the stream again. Okay, I'm back. Yeah, my Discord crashed. Okay, but I am back now. Can you guys hear me on Discord okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Excellent. Oh, Plebes, you're back. Nice.
Hello.
Okay, so I was answering a question here on Twitch. Meanwhile, I was reloading the Discord server, and Discord is being Discord, that is correct. And his question was normals. So normals is basically, if you imagine a face inside 3D, that it points outwards. And when it points outwards, it kind of has this like angle that shows outwards from this side here. So let me just get my pen. So you have a face, and the face points out from this point. So you can see like each face has a direction like this, and it points out. And if we zoom in into like this, the edges of the corners here, you can see that I have this like this round shape that's going around this corner. So in this case, I'm using this thing called a binormal. So on every vertice, you can have a normal that's pointing out at one edge, and you could have another normal that's pointing out on the same edge here. And this will create a curved face. And this is where you can use your normals to create the illusion that something is beveled. So if we take a look at my reference geometry, let me just show you the 4 principles. So here we got the first thing, which is reduce the bevels, or reduce the loops. So if we take a look at this loop here, we got a loop here, which I don't need. I don't need this one here. I don't need this one here. If I have those loops, you can see like, okay, I'm going to make a copy so we can have a reference. If I zoom out, and I can see there are some loops that I don't need because there's just not enough pixels on the screen from that shape. So I'm going to remove these loops by holding down Alt and left click to select the loop. And when I zoom out, I can see that the silhouette of the shape, so I'm going to go to the flat shape, the silhouette, the general silhouette is very similar. So if we zoom in again, okay, that looks okay. More or less, it's about the same. I preserved the silhouette of the shape using the flat shader view to kind of see what I'm doing. And now, if I go back to my studio view, but if I take a look, I have this sharp edge in here, I have a curved edge. sharp and then curved. Let's put it just to smooth or auto smooth. Smooth is fine. So you can see that one edge is smooth and the other edge is sharp. This is where we need to go inside of the normals and fix it. And to do that, we're going to use a modifier called weighted normals. So we add the modifier, and then we choose this one called weighted normals. When we do that, it's going to use the weight of the face and pretend that it's going to be curved. So if we zoom out, you can see that one, even though it's high poly and has all these loops and things, the low poly one, even though it's a flat edge with the general shape, has preserved the normals. Okay, so let me just quickly review the chat. Oh, it took you a long time to redo the hair. I see here in the chat, Slink, that you have had a very high poly sculpt. And it took you 3 or 4 days to retopologize it. Okay, you must have did it manually. That's okay, well done, well done. Okay, let me just make sure that chat's fine. Okay, so thanks Slink for sharing the Discord chat. And yeah, so here on the Twitch, the perpendicular face is how you define the curves. So it kind of creates a weight between the different faces. And the modifiers can help you save a lot of polygons. So this is where we need to start. So in this case, okay, so there's one thing that we can do here. Another thing we can do is, for example, if we look at the top view, we can see that there's many faces around the circle. So because there's so many faces around the circle, what we can do is we can select an edge, select a next jump of an edge, and using Alt plus, if we go to selection, more or less, control number pad plus, you can hit more. So in the selection, more or less, then choose more or control numpad plus. Whoops. Oh no, it's not more, it's repeat selection, sorry. Next active. There you go. So let me just assign a shortcut. I usually have it as Control Shift plus. And another one is Control Shift minus. So you select one, and then you select the next one, and then with those two, you can use your hotkeys to repeat the selection around the loops, and this will repeat every second loop here so that I can select them and then I can delete them. I can do the same here. 1, 2, repeat the selection around. I can also hold down the button and it will do it, and delete. So with that, that's a nice quick way. You can't do it with like full loops, but you can do it with rings nice and quickly to delete the faces so that you can preserve the general shape of your topology. So if we zoom out again, we can see that from far away, they look almost identical, except one of them, we take a look at the, let me just activate an add-on to get better topology, called PolySource, which is a free one. Really good for retopology. Go back to the main view. So here in the top bar, you can see that one is 48, 48 faces, and the other one is 256 faces. So we've dropped the topology to almost 1/4 just with this technique, using the weighted normals and removing loops. And another thing with that you need to keep in mind is your triangularization, which is probably the 5th rule. So it's a lot of manual labor, but it gives you a very good and very clean result, and this is perfect for hard surface modeling. The same can be done with, for example, this cube. You can select all of these edges here with you holding down Alt and Shift while you shift click your faces, and you just delete them all. And this one and this one too, and this one here as well. This is the general shape, and using my weighted normals modifier, I've got my rounded cube again. From far away, it's perfectly fine. If I have really big bevels, then I could save the middle one a bit better. What happens if I make a mistake? like I did just now. For example, here I have this this cube, for example, which I'm going to just copy the scale, and I'm going to recreate what I just had earlier with like the shape here more or less. So I'm going to apply this. So what happens if I made a mistake? So if I made a mistake, for example, I removed too much topology and I want to add back topology, what I can do is I can use this technique called the shrink wrap technique. So the shrink wrap technique is using the shrink wrap modifier of one of your low poly mesh. Wait, where is it? So I need to select the low poly mesh. The low poly mesh, there we go. So I need to select the low poly mesh, and I need to add a shrink wrap modifier, which is here underneath simple deform, and above mesh deform we have the shrink wrap. And then I select the high poly mesh, and with that I need to make sure that I have target normal project activated, because this is more accurate. And then I have it outside the surface or above the surface or on the surface. And with that I can start to, for example, add new loops into the mesh. So if I go back here and I want to add a loop cut. Hey, what's my loop cut button? I changed my hotkeys. So I'm going to use my edges, my legacy, loop cut and slide, assign a shortcut, Control R. There we go. So I can start to add topology. And as you can see, because the topology I'm adding it's automatically deforming to the other mesh. So with that, I can like make sure the shrink wrap's at the top and the weighted normal's at the bottom. And with that, I've increased the topology a little bit to fix what I did, and I can use my shrink wrap to help me fix the shape from underneath. When I'm done, just hit apply, and there we go. I just added topology and it preserved the shape of the mesh underneath. The shrink wrap technique is very good. For example, if you have like a default head shape, you could use the default head and shrink wrap it on top of the other head that you have sculpted. And with that, you can save time by pushing around and like using the shrink wrap modifier over your other head. So let's go back to our notes just to make sure we're on track. So we've had a look at reducing the loops. We've had a look at preserving the silhouette. We've had a look at preserving the normals using the weighted normal technique, the weighted normal modifier, preserving silhouette by using the shrink wrap modifier. And we've also had a look at using reducing loops by selecting loops and deleting. Just a quick tip. Inside Blender, to delete loops, you can press X, and I think it is instant, but you may have to go into your preferences to turn off confirmations. Inside B for Artists, we have a technique where when you delete something, it doesn't ask what you're deleting, it just does it for you, so that it would practically collapse, and you don't have to like pick and choose what you want to delete. It will just delete, like in other software like Maya. So you select a loop, press delete, and it will delete it automatically. Or you select a face and you delete and it's gone. Inside Blender, you would have to open up the delete menu and you have to choose which one you want to delete, which is often painfully slow. So I recommend, if you're deleting a lot of geometry, I recommend you use B for Artists in this case. Right, so back to the next mesh. So now you're wondering, okay, what's all this pain that we have? What happens if we have, for example, this high density mesh? Obviously, a lot of people say you need good topology for everything, but there are some rules. Typically, you don't need to use incredible topology for absolutely everything, And even in AAA games, sometimes the topology can be disastrous in the sense of quads. But basically, you need to remember 3 rules, basically. The first rule is tries are okay if the thing is static, right?
No!
You can use tries. Tries are perfectly fine if the thing does not deform. Quads are necessary only for deformable objects. All right? And if you plan to use subdivision in the future. Because if you're making game assets, you will not be using subdivision in the future, meaning you will not need to have to rely on quads all the time. Quads are typically useful for characters that have facial deformations, they have like arms and legs that run around, or for cartoons where the ball squashes and stretches. Quads are important when it comes to deformations. But triangles for hard surface models, for environment models, for rocks, for trees and things like that, it's okay, perfectly fine. And in fact, I recommend you develop your triangles in the software with the correct normals. So when you use your triangulate modifier, make sure that you turn on keep normals and turn on beauty. When you have beauty and keep normals, it will preserve the normals that you had from the original mesh, and you'll have it as a beautiful mesh to export to FBX or GLTF. GLTF will automatically triangulate your mesh unless you already have it triangulated. FBX will be interpreted as a triangulated mesh inside of the game engine, so you better tell it how to triangulate first before you export. And that will give you better normals and predictable game assets. So that's something to keep in mind. And the next thing after that, okay, so we have this like crazy high topology mesh. If we select the loops, it's going to be extremely difficult. So what do we do? Do you guys have an idea? If you have an idea, drop it in the chat or open up your mic. What do you think? How can I make this? Decimate. Good. Right, so what I'm going to do, I have this as a hotkey or a kind of I use this modifier list add-on, which makes this show up inside my full screen. And it gives me some hot access to, or quick access to some quick modifiers that I use often. So the decimate one I use a lot. So the decimate here, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to copy the high poly, and I'm just going to give it a name. So just show the name and give this, whoops, F2 to change the name. We'll call this the ICO HD. So it's the high poly. So I'm going to grab the low poly. And with this low poly, first things first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to shrink wrap it. The one that I told you to preserve the silhouette. So I'm going to shrink wrap it off first. I'm going to turn it to the nearest target normal project just outside the surface. That's perfectly fine. Maybe I can give it an offset or not, depending how I want to bake it or not. But in this case, to avoid Z-clip, I'm going to move it just a little bit, and we're good. Now I got my shrink wrap. And from there, I'm going to decimate, and I'm going to start collapsing by distance. So when I start collapsing by distance, I can use a ratio of like 10%, 0.1. And because I'm using the shrink wrap, I can practically control how it's going to look. So if I'm going to, let me just instance this first. Right, so I made an instance. Here's the high poly and the low poly. So with the high poly, it's about 7,800 faces, and with the low poly, it's about 700 faces, 1/10 of the size. And if I make it smooth, it's going to look very similar to the normals from the high poly mesh. So with that, using the shrink wrap and the decimate modifier, if I don't need to have it deform a lot, and it's a static mesh, it's really good for retopologizing sculpts. And the good thing with this is the decimate modifier works well with different types of meshes that are close together, for example, fingers. Another thing you can do is you can use a planar and then decimate. So, for example, here, with this mesh here, if I don't want to manually replace the loops and I'm okay with triangulation, what I can do is I can add a decimate modifier and choose planar. When I use planar, this gives me the ability to, let's just make it smooth. So this gives me the ability to remove based on an angle the different faces. So for example, whatever face is flat is going to remain flat. And then from there, what I can do is I can triangulate again, keep the normals, keep it beautiful, and it will, let's take a closer look. Okay, there are some problems. So because of those problems, what I'm going to do is maybe lower the angle just a little bit and see if I can drop it a little bit. So the other one is 512 and now this one is 360. If we take a closer look, you can see that it made the flat sides nice and flat, and the other sides, well, they're perfectly fine with the triangulation. But this is one technique that can help sometimes, especially with more flatter surfaces. For example, mechs or robots or pieces of furniture. You can use the planar decimate to make flat faces a really big face so that it works okay. But just the only problem is you have to be careful with triangulation. So always use it with triangulate to make sure it works together. And if you can, clean up your loops first. When you clean up your loops, then it's a bit more predictable when the planar decimate works together. If you made a multi-resolution modifier to sculpt, which is a technique of sculpting with different layers and subdivision, you can always unsubdivide something as well. So those are modifier-based retopology. Shrink ramp, weighted normal, planar decimate with triangulate, and removing your loops manually. But what happens if we have a complicated mesh like this? What do we do? So in this case, with this complex mesh, things that you need to do, this is where you start to, this is the why people think it is painful. When it comes to character retopology, it takes a lot of effort to recreate your loops and the quads and everything you need to make the face work. So when you're faced with a problem like this, it is best to use Retopology Tools, which you can use basically inside of your mesh settings and inside sculpt mode. In the tools, you can use a technique called remeshing, and you can use a voxel remesh with a particular size, or if you're going to remesh, I think you can use a quad remesh. There we go. In the remesh panel, in the bottom left, inside them, or in the mesh data tab, which is green inside Blender, you can have a quad remesh. So the quadroflow remesh is quite decent to some degree. You can tell how many faces you want. So for example, I want 300 faces and I want to preserve the normals or not, or the mesh boundaries or not, preserve what is sharp, what isn't, use the mesh symmetry, and then I generate. And this will create a rough mesh of the base of the basis of the other. If I don't like the symmetry, then I can use a mirror modifier. So if I take a look at, where is it? I haven't organized my tabs, so everything is lost. Here it is. I can use the inbuilt Blender tool called Auto Mirror, and if I'm using a widget, I can see what axis I have with this model. I can mirror it on the X plane and use the Auto Mirror tool so that I have a symmetrical mesh. And with that, I can also use other tools, for example, weld. The weld tool will help me fix the small little pieces of topology that are not clean. And with that, I can start working on cleaning things up. I can also do the other techniques as well, which, for example, I could use planar to make some faces flat. I could use the techniques of the triangulation to make sure the triangulation is good, make sure it's fine. And I can also use the same decimation of collapsing to lower the topology to how I need it to be. And I can make something quick. If I don't need the quads, then I can collapse. If I do need the quads, then I just hide that and I use quadra reflow, and I can start to clean up the topology manually. What I recommend when you start cleaning up topology and you do need the quads, I recommend you use tools, for example, this one that I really love called Polykilt. Basically, it gives me highlights and it gives me the ability to click and drag and click and hold to delete a face, and will hold down shift to fill a face, and it will predict the faces as well. So I could delete this, hold down shift, and I can tell it to kind of predict a face, and I can click and drag and it will merge, and I can do hold down shift, and it just helps me quickly create different pieces. And if I really want to, I can also extrude or fix up pieces when I need to anytime, or hold down a hotkey inside the tool settings. So for example, if I hold down Alt, I can tell it to do an edge loop or loop cut. So hold down Alt, loop cut, or edge loop tool. Which one was it? You got edge extrude brush. Oh, here's the other cool thing as well. If I'm using my shrink wrap over here, there are some tools that people often use with sculpting, which is smoothing out the geometry and making it okay. If you use the Polykilt tool, you can do the same by actually smoothing out your meshes. And let me just apply everything. You can smooth out the mesh, and we're using the shrink wrap over the other one. You can start to smooth the mesh out, or start removing faces and things like this by holding down your mouse key. And if you hold down shift, it will smooth the topology out so that you can start to redistribute how the shape looks, and make sure that the topology is relatively even, which is kind of nice. So here's a clear example. It kind of holds the shape together mostly, and it helps you to redistribute the faces in a nicer way when you're modeling. Blender does not have this built in unless you're using the sculpt mode. So as you can see, this is the problem. The sculpt mode, I lose the shape a little bit. But if I use Polykilt and I hold down shift, it starts to smooth out the loops here, and it keeps the general shape a bit better than Blender while you're inside the edit mode. So there we go. That's the difficult part of retopology, and obviously that's for another level, but in general you can take a lot of shortcuts when you use modifiers, when you decide to be okay with triangles, if you know the purpose of a static mesh, and you can use your weighted normals or your normal transfer data. You can do that as well. Transfer your normals from a high poly to low poly using the data transfer modifier, and you can remove the loops. So with that, I hope you find that useful, and we can move on to some art now that Plebes is here, and I hope Pers is still here too. And De Tarauto on Twitch, the add-on that I mentioned was called Polykilt, and the one to look at topology. For example, if I'm here and I'm retopologizing this mesh, let me just add another Suzanne mesh monkey. If I have this mesh here, Oops, here. And I want it to be smooth like this. And then I have another Suzanne, which is going to be the low poly, like this, on top of the other. This poly source, I have a retopology mode, which will give me the ability to, when I'm in edit mode, I can see the topology in a much cleaner way. And if I see a face, you can see what's underneath in a nice way, and you can use your snapping tools, for example, snap to face project, so that you can move your tool on top of the other and use like the same poly kilt to fill in your faces. You can also do the same with poly build, loop cut, extrude regions or faces, and the bisect and the knife tool. But I like poly kilt because it makes it all in one. All of these 5 tools in one.
Sorry, do you mind if I interrupt?
No, no problem at all.
It's quilt, not kilt.
Quilt. I keep forgetting.
Quilt.
I've been trying not to say anything this whole time.
Poly quilt. Okay. Well, thanks for that. I'll see if I can dig up some links later.
As you were.
As I was. Okay. So the piece we're going to take a look at first is Pers's piece, which I like a lot. Let me open up the original. So Pers, would you like to come on to the mic and share a little bit about your piece?
Sure, yeah. I've been messing with AI lately, stable diffusion animations. Basically using one image as like 65, let's just say 65% of the image, the frame before, and 35% of a prompt dream. So each frame gets, it's almost like video feedback. You get a piece of the frame before mixed with a new dream with a camera that's moving in 3D space. And it does depth tracking for every frame, so you can actually see things look like walls and floors and stuff, and it feels like you're moving through 3D space because it's using this trippy depth perception thing to figure out where the camera is in space. It's really neat, and I recommend anyone try it because you can play with it for free on Google Colabs.
It is very mesmerizing.
Yeah, I made about like maybe 100 of these animations, and this one I made last night or the night before, and I just really liked it.
100?
Yeah.
That's incredible. So how long does it take for you to render one of these pieces? Because you mentioned...
anywhere from, well, it depends how long it is. It depends on the quality, depends on a lot of things, but it could be anywhere from 30 minutes to 7 hours for like a really long high quality one. So it just depends. Yeah.
That's incredible. So where could I see more of these pieces? Are you hosting them somewhere?
I have the whole thing's on GiphyCat. I'll drop a link for it in a few minutes. I have an album of them on GiphyCat. If you're actually on that. You can just click my name and then click the collections link in the middle.
Collections.
You're on it right there. Yeah, click collections in the middle, and then you can click Stable Diffusion into Forum. And that's
91.
most of the ones I've uploaded so far.
Wow.
That one was actually a collaboration with Andromeda. Really cool artist. She basically wrote a story, and we tried to prompt our way through the story.
I can see
It didn't work well, but it was our first try, so we'll try again. GiphyCat jumps to some random image after a couple playthroughs.
Yeah. I'm going to turn off the autoplay.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Sometimes they're less than safe for work.
This one here. I remember seeing this one a little while back where it zooms out and then zooms back in, and it has this kind of a feedback loop into it.
Yeah, it's like video feedback because it's using the frame before to inform the next frame. So if you zoom out, you basically get this really cool framing effect. It's not cool all the time. Sometimes it's absolutely nauseating because of the
Yes.
sort of the speed at which it moves. If it moves at the wrong speed, it's really hard on the brain. So you got to watch it. But yeah, it's really fun.
It is incredible. I can imagine these playing in the background as some DJ in a club.
Yeah, that's basically making a giant visual sample pack for that sort of thing right now with all these animations. And then I'll move them all into Arena and build sequences for live shows out of them.
Some of them are quite intricate.
Yeah, I love the forest one. I think at least unconsciously it inspired me to do a forest render.
Oh, sweet.
Actually, that's an excellent segue because, yeah, this is incredible. It's kind of a strange sensation where you watch these pieces as your brain tries to make sense of the forms and the shapes, but then it shifts before your eyes.
To that feeling. Yeah, I'm becoming addicted to that feeling.
Yeah, it's like you lose a sense of reality, so you dive into the emotion.
Yeah.
Well, it's
Super
like
cool.
staring at a Puref board, but in condensed
All at the same time, yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's almost similar to that scene on The Matrix when Neo plugs in and he learns Kung Fu in a matter of seconds.
I know Kung Fu.
Exactly. It feels like you're looking at hundreds of images at a time and it just fills your brain with the concept. Beautiful. So, plebes, you mentioned that this was one of your inspirations to one of your pieces, and I wanted to show this with the community as well. So here we have the piece which you've created, and it is basically, would you like to give us an introduction to this piece?
Yeah, so recently I worked on my geometry nodes walls and I was quite finished with it, and also I took part on the Arendelle Game Jam, and as a prize I won Scatter 5. So I really wanted to learn it, and it has a ton of functions. It's really a lot, and I didn't even use a small part of it. I think I manually use mostly the manual distribution tools, which are super cool. Like you can move instances in real time around, which is a bit mind-blowing. And so I found together this render today. Didn't do that before. I think I made it once for Skype January. It was the prompt once. I found the deer, which was actually a cow, so I sculpted her a bit too. On ToastWhip and for free, and I added a bit of fur to make a bit fluffy in the highlights.
Yeah, it works quite nicely.
That's basically it.
It almost looks like a painting. The way that you got the noise going on inside, the color scheme that you chose. Those walls that you created as well. I hear a rumor that you've been working very hard at creating this wall generator for geometry nodes with materials that work in cycles, correct?
And at least it feels hard. Like usually I didn't thought I invest so much time in that wall generator, but I made some procedural stone materials for it, and then it kind of escalated quickly, and now it's quite a lot of walls and different presets, but I'm nearly finished, and I'm actually happy they do nice in the render. I think the kind of painterly effect comes from having a ton of noise and then denoising it 2 times, and then I did a bit of compositor, but the actual render, denoised render, looks pretty similar.
Looks really good. And how did you do these volumetrics with a little bit of fog or steam?
That's actually a paid asset I got, and I really like it. It's the ENU bot Steam Pack for KitOps, and it's animated alpha PNGs.
All
Not
right.
sponsored, but
The
it's really
billboards.
a cool product because you have like 20 different Steam, and then they all have like 200 frames or something around that. So you basically have thousands of different Steam images.
Right. Looks like the antelope or the reindeer had charged through a Christmas light bonanza.
That's an early version of the BuggerPy Ivy generator, and I just exposed the curve which generates the Ivy.
Looks cool. Very beautiful. We have a comment on Twitch that says it's an amazing, great job by Day Tuarta. It is really good.
Oh, thank you.
So Osama has mentioned, I'm surprised no one has started selling these GIFs as NFTs. Oh, maybe they are. Okay.
I literally do.
You literally do, yeah.
I literally do, yeah.
I think one of your other pieces I just saw recently sold out.
Yeah, I just sold it last night.
Congratulations, that's pretty cool.
Why, thank you.
Okay, so we're coming into close to an hour, and just want to say thank you for connecting, everyone, for this whole time. This has been a quiet evening, but it was nice to get to see your art. And please, I really love this piece. I think from all your art pieces that you've created, this most recent piece I think is one of my favorite.
I really like it too. I was saying that, but I realized I was muted. Really gorgeous piece.
Thank you. Yeah, you think it's kind of portfolio ready, or I'm not sure. Yeah,
Definitely
okay.
for the paint, for the lighting, the environment design, the showcase of your walls that's being used, the placement of the foliage is very credible. The debris on the ground, you can certainly tell that your placement of nature it's on point. It's very hard to make it feel natural, but you've managed to get this hierarchy of the floor quite nicely with the life and the death, the dead leaves and the living trees together. And you
Yeah,
frame.
it really looks like what do you call it? Quixel level. Like it looks really good. Like really good.
Yeah, like you understand what you're doing.
Doesn't look like a 3D scene from a glance, which is really cool.
Yes, and that is a hard thing to pull off. To get that harmony in the foliage is a hard thing to pull off. But you've managed to get that life and death cycle and the placement and the competition for the light. It kind of makes it feel quite credible. So good work there.
All right, that's nice to hear.
I just don't see any moths, and moths are what make things realistic. So maybe just add some moths.
Just out of interest, what was the Steam pack?
Yeah.
And how do you get it?
It's on Ian Hubert's website, I think. I've seen it before too. I keep meaning to pick it up. It's really cool.
On his Patreon, wouldn't it be?
Yeah, it's also I found it on Blender Market as a KitOps pack.
Yeah.
So I can use it with KitOps as inserts.
So is it just still frames built? What was a billboard?
It's like image sequence.
I found the
Like
link.
videos.
I threw it into the Discord chat and also here into the Twitch. So Luke,
cool though, because you can use them in
Texas.
animations. Yeah.
Well, that's what I was thinking. I could do that shit.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. That's
Yeah,
what they're for. They're
exactly.
Really cool.
You could probably use any
really
video packs that has a black background. You can change that into a shader and put that onto a billboard. Make the billboard face the camera or keep it stiff, and you're good to go. The age-old technique of using visual effects was practically that.
I have a VJ mask pack available on Gumroad. Just kidding. Of black and white and black and transparent textures.
Yeah, which is a technique.
Well, I'm looking for steam and smoke. You know what I mean?
Yeah, these are like
perfect for that.
Geometric shapes.
I mean, I also added 3 normal volumes to get a bit more noise. But yeah, it's super handy. I use it a lot because it saves a lot of performance.
That's great. Okay, well, thanks guys for sharing that. So, next week we have a special guest of Arundel, who has just finished releasing his beginner course with geometry nodes inside of Blender. So we're going to be interviewing him. If you do have questions for Arundel for next week, feel free to drop it into the Q&A and critique chat here in Discord, or drop me a private message, and I will book it for next Friday. So I'll be meeting again with you hopefully next week at 2000 UTC. And with that, I would like to say thank you for connecting. If you like what I do, just give a little follow, give a little like, and
Give a little whistle.
yeah, exactly. And throw me a cup of coffee. I like coffee. Anyway, and I wish you guys an excellent weekend. And I hope...
Thanks, Trace.
Oh, and just to remind you of the retopology, don't forget to preserve your silhouette, your normals, and don't worry about triangles. And use modifiers when you can, and we're good to go. All right, so thanks guys, thanks Pers, and thanks Plebes. Have a good one.
Thanks, Ray.